So, yeah, another Halloween-centric vid, and this one's going to be about relaunching the dark, how I would do the Dark Universe, the failed cinematic shared monster, Universal Monster Universe that never took off the ground. Thanks, Tom Cruise. So, just a couple things. This video is gonna be phase 1, and I actually planned it out for 4 phases. So, if you guys are curious, just ask, let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this, and I'll do like phases 2 through 4. Yeah, I got all the movies planned out, like the story in general, and this, of course, we're starting with phase 1. So, yeah, just let me know in the comments below if you guys want to see more. Just let me know. Anyway, so let's talk about phase 1. Now, the big thing with this cinematic unit, actually, let's go into how this cinematic unit, this version of the Dark Universe, is being constructed. In this universe, it's more horror. It's not action. It's more of a horror vibe, and it's a period piece universe. It is a universe that is set in a continuity that's like somewhere nebulous in the 1800s. But the first movie is going to be set a little earlier than that, and I'll like early 1800s, and I'll explain that in a bit. So that's where we kind of are. It's a dark, kind of Victorian Gothic, kind of very atmospheric kind of universe. And for this universe, it's all of like the first phase. It's not phase 1 is not every monster out there. It's just about 5 movies in phase 1 for this first part. And as we go along, there'll be more monsters introduced, more of a story put out. But here, phase 1, as I call it, the dark corners, or the dark shadows. This is more or less the monsters in the shadows. There are monsters out there, and they're slowly coming out of the darkness. But for right now, it's just they're all in the darkness, and these monsters in particular are monsters that we make. And I give you a hint as to who's in here. But yeah. And it's more or less the building blocks for this version of the Dark Universe. So let's get into it with the first movie. Starting off with, you may be thinking like it's Frankenstein or something else or some of the big names. No. Our first movie is actually technically the first Universal Monster movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, yeah, while I've never been a proponent of having the Hunchback, Quasimodo as a Universal monster, because that's kind of the point of the book. Here, that he's not a monster, that the people around him are monsters. But here, it's a little different. Like, this is a different story. I'm embracing if they want to put him with the monsters, fucking fine. In this continuity, he is the first Universal monster, so that it only makes sense that he is the first of the Universal of this series. So the story begins very, we're shifting time a little bit, because it's supposed to be set during the 11th century. Here, it's the early 1800s, and essentially, in this story, Quasimodo is the bell ringer, and he's known throughout the city, but he stays in the tower because the priests, keep it watch over him. And also Frollo, yeah, that was his name in the book too, Frollo, at least I think it was. But yeah, Frollo is a priest, and this, unlike the Disney movie, we can actually talk more about this movie would be more about religious persecution. Not to say the Disney movie didn't, but here we get to talk about how poisonous religion can be in the wrong hands. And Quasimodo himself is basically an innocent man who has been driven to kill by Frollo, who more or less uses him as someone when other priests go against him, or there's someone who is blocking his agendas. He sends Quasimodo out to kill them, saying it's God's will. God, this is how you redeem your soul. Frollo gives him the spiel of, God made you this way because your mother was a whore and a Romani piece of garbage, and God cursed you in the womb for her sins. So to redeem your soul and your mother's soul, you have to kill for me. and Quasimodo has to do that. But while this is going on, Quasimodo is hearing whispers in the attic. He's hearing like whispers in the rafters of the church of the Notre Dame. He's hearing like these strange whispers, and they're talking to him, and all he sees are like red eyes looking back at him, but he doesn't know if that's real or not. So as the movie progresses, Quasimodo also befriends a young church boy who's kind of being thrown here by his dad. And he's like, he finds Quasimodo a fascinating person. He's very intelligent, and the boy's name is Victor. So this is our young Victor Frankenstein. And Victor talks about like when how he lost his mother. So so he and Quasimodo bond over, Quasi's mother and theirs. But as the days go on, eventually Frollo's plot of using Quasimodo as a murderer is revealed, and the church kicks Quasimodo out. He escapes, but now he's been living with a group of a Romani camp, and he falls in love with Esmeralda, beautiful woman, but Frollo, not being the petty bitch that he is, has them killed. Angry mob blame he basically has the Romani kill Quasimodo by framing him for this, and by the end of it, Victor was the only one who saw him and was sad for him. But as Quasimodo's dying, he sees a man in black in the background, just kind of watching, and the man in black, you might know who he is, but we'll get to him later. So the man in black, is just like, you poor wretched soul. This will never happen again. This will never... so the man in black leaves. Now we get to our second movie in the film, Frankenstein. In here, Frankenstein is grown up, and he is currently he is in the midst of planning to build the monster. But the problem is, his kind of fantasy, his wild fantasies, as well as his, all of his work, is kind of deemed horrible, even by his own father, who cuts him off from funding this research. So now he has no money. But then comes a person who will give him a person who is a in-between for a patron for him, and that being Renfield. Renfield is the messenger, and he says, my master, my master wants to pay you. He sees he sees the good your research could do. So Victor gets the money. He does create the monster. But and this one follows a lot of the book. He's horrified by what he did, because he's like, oh God, I've broken the barrier between life and death and made something that not even God would contend with. The monster breaks free. Victor returns to his family life, telling his dad in hysterics that I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone against you. His father welcomes him back, and he's like, I'm sorry, son, I didn't want to do this, but it was the only way to bring you back to me. He has he gets married, but on their wedding night, the monster returns and kills his wife. And throughout the village that they're living in, there have been horrible deaths and pieces of people being taken away. So in this one, this is where we get to the twist of this Frankenstein monster. The monster here is whenever because he's dead flesh, his body's rotting, so he has to kill people and replace body parts and organs with fresh body parts. Yeah, it's very much more of a horror show. But eventually Victor does hound the monster after killing his wife, his father being killed, his brother. He hunts him down at the ends of the earth and tackles him in on the slopes of Antarctica into the frozen water. But the monster escapes, and Renfield is just Renfield sees the monster and he's like, you must be you must be Frankenstein's son. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Renfield. My master would like to talk to you. But the monster's kind of weird about it, but he's like, friend. So yeah, Renfield takes him to his boss. We'll get to him in a bit. You already know who it is. But now we're moving on to our next the next movie in this phase, and that is our next monster on this list is the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's revealed in this movie that Dr. Jekyll was an associate of Victor Frankenstein. They actually studied under the same in the same college, and were actually friends. They were both kind of experimenting on, boundaries beyond life and death. But while Victor was dealing with, the world beyond, Henry was more concerned about the human condition. See, in here, I would have it that Henry did study psychology, he wanted to be a therapist, but then he kind of had this notion of, well, wait a minute, why can't we just get rid of the human malady if we can just give it a physical form, and the human body and mind will be free of it? So he goes about with his mastery of chemistry to make a formula, becomes Mr. Hyde, and also he gets funding from an unknown patron, with the in-between being Renfield. So Mr. Hyde is freed and every night goes on a rampage, and it eventually becomes like a psychological battle between Henry and Hyde, until eventually Hyde wins. Like that would be the end of this movie, would be Mr. Edward Hyde is the winner of the battle between them. Like, he poisons himself, and Hyde just gets up, just throws it all up and is like, what the bloody hell was that, Henry? Thought you could just kill me like that? Oh, no, that ain't happening. So Renfield comes, and he's like, you're a new, you live in a world of monsters. Mr. Hyde. My master is building a coalition of, shall we say, like-minded associates. Would you be interested to join? He's like, tell me more, mate. So that's the story of Mr. Hyde. Then we come to our next film in Phase 1, The Phantom of the Opera. So the Phantom of the Opera for this is that it's not too dissimilar from the original film, where it's guy wanting woman, goes about killing people horribly. But the difference here is that by the end of the film, I actually have a prequel scene where Renfield's kind of like our Phil Coulson. He's like a twisted horror version of Phil Coulson. If you haven't figured out, if you didn't realize it yet, he's like, oh, he's the Phil Coulson to Dracula's evil Nick Fury. So Renfield is at the theater, and he's actually there. And when the end of the movie happens and the destruction of the catacombs happens, Eric, the Phantom, is still alive, and it's actually Renfield who helps him out and wants to bring him to his master. And that's where we finally get in. If this was an actual Phase 1, you would already know you already know who the master is. But he says who is your master? He goes, Count Dracula. And this leads to our final movie of Phase 1, Dracula. So Dracula is the end of Phase 1, and this is more of a prequel film, where in here, this film is not so much an origin story. Dracula is already Dracula. Vlad Tepes has become Count Dracula at this point, and this is more or less the reign of terror he's had. But however, in this continuity, it's revealed that Dracula has been at war with another person, Ezekiel Van Helsing. So Ezekiel Van Helsing is the grandfather of Abraham Van Helsing. Basically, there's been a war between Dracula and the Van Helsing family. The Van Helsings have been part of a order, the Order of the Dragon, that once served Count Dracula, but they broke away when he became a monster. Among those was a knight known as the House of Van Helsing. So the House of Van Helsing really had it out for Count Dracula. So this is a war between Dracula and Ezekiel Van Helsing, and eventually leading. This movie would also explain where the three brides came from. I know I've talked about how prequel movies. I hate how horror prequel movies have to explain everything in one movie, but here it would kind of be justified of having them. I I would already have two brides, and one of them would be another woman who they're battling. Like, Dracula would already have two of his brides. This is the movie that would show the third bride, as well as, you know, Dracula's desire for monsters to rule the world. After, this movie would just end with Ezekiel getting murdered, but his son and wife, Ezekiel's wife and his son, which would be Van Helsing's father, managed to escape. So from there, the woman who Ezekiel was trying to save becomes the third bride, and then we cut to the end of the film, which will probably be a final scene or an after credit scene, where in here he's now Renfield has presented the Phantom, Mr. Hyde, and Frankenstein, and the Frankenstein monster, and brought them together. He's like, "Gentlemen, let us begin." And that's how Phase 1 of this new Dark Universe would end. So there you go, guys. That's pretty much Phase 1 of my version of the Dark Universe. So you guys tell me in the comments below, what do you guys think of this video, of these ideas so far? Do you guys like them, hate them? Comment below, let me know. And once again, if I get enough good feedback, I'll do Phase 2. But for now, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.